I never thought that hiding in my own son's car to surprise him would be the moment I discovered he wanted to destroy me. My name is Leonard Brooks, and at 56 years old, I thought I had built something meaningful. For the past 28 years, I've poured my heart and soul into Brooks & Associates, a mid-sized construction company here in Denver, Colorado. What started as a small, contracting business in my garage has grown into a company with 47 employees and annual revenues that would make my late father proud. I've always been what you'd call a hands-on father. Maybe too hands-on, according to my ex-wife Sarah, but I believed in being present. When my son Michael was growing up, I coached his little league team, attended every school play, and taught him everything I knew about business, construction, and what I thought were the values that mattered: hard work, integrity, and family loyalty. Michael is 32 now, married to Jessica for 6 years, and they live in a beautiful house in Cherry Creek that I helped them buy. He's been working at Brooks & Associates for the past 8 years, starting from the ground up, just like I insisted. I wanted him to understand every aspect of the business before he eventually took over. That was always the plan. Father to son, generation to generation. Last Tuesday started like any other day. I was in my office reviewing the quarterly reports when Michael stopped by around 3 p.m. He seemed different lately, more distant, more impatient during our meetings. I attributed it to the stress of the Morrison project, our biggest contract to date. A $12 million residential development that could set our company up for the next decade. "Dad, I'm heading out early today," he said, standing in my doorway with his keys already in hand. "Jessica and I have that dinner with her parents tonight." I looked up from my papers. Michael looked tired, stressed. The Morrison project had been keeping both of us up at night, but I could see it was weighing on him more than I'd realized. "How are you holding up, son?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "I know this project has been demanding, but you're doing great work." He gave me a quick, almost forced smile. "I'm fine, Dad. Just need to get going." Something about his tone bothered me, but I let it go. "Drive safe." Till Jessica, I said hello. After he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Michael and I used to talk for hours about everything: business, life, his dreams. Lately, our conversations felt mechanical, professional. I missed my son. That's when I got what I thought was a brilliant idea. Michael's birthday was coming up next week, and I'd been planning to surprise him with something special. I had been working on a proposal to officially make him Vice President of Operations, a significant promotion that would come with a substantial raise and more autonomy in running the day-to-day operations. I'd been keeping it secret, wanting to present it to him at his birthday dinner, but sitting there in my office, looking at the preliminary documents I'd been preparing, I thought, why wait? Why not surprise him today? I knew Michael always stopped by Starbucks on his way home, the one on Colorado Boulevard, about 10 minutes from our office. He had this routine: grande dark roast, no sugar, sometimes a blueberry muffin if Jessica wasn't watching his diet. It was one of those little details you notice about someone you care about. My plan was simple. I'd drive to the Starbucks, wait for him to go inside, then hide in the back seat of his BMW. When he got back to the car, I'd surprise him with the promotion news. Maybe it was childish for a 56-year-old man, but I wanted to see that genuine smile I remembered from when he was younger, before work and adult responsibilities seemed to drain the joy out of everything. I arrived at the Starbucks parking lot at 4:15 p.m. and spotted Michael's silver BMW 330i immediately. It was parked toward the back of the lot, away from the main entrance. Typical Michael, always being cautious about door dings. I waited in my truck for about 10 minutes before I saw him walk into the coffee shop. My heart was actually racing with excitement. When was the last time I'd done something spontaneous like this? When was the last time I'd tried to genuinely surprise my son? I quickly walked over to his car. The doors were unlocked. something I'd always told him not to do, but I was grateful for his carelessness today. I slipped into the back seat, crouching down behind the driver's seat. The leather still had that new car smell mixed with Michael's cologne, the same Armani fragrance I'd been buying him for Christmas since college. From my hiding spot, I could see through the tinted windows into the Starbucks. Michael was at the counter, talking to the barista. He was wearing the navy blue suit I'd bought him last year, the one Jessica said made him look executive material. Looking at him through the window, I felt this surge of pride. This was my son, my legacy, the future of everything I'd built. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I started to wonder what was taking him so long. Usually Michael was in and out of Starbucks in under 5 minutes. From my cramped position I could see him now, sitting at one of the tables near the window, talking on his phone. His expression looked serious, focused. Probably business, I thought. The Morrison project had been requiring constant communication with subcontractors and city planning officials. I shifted slightly, trying to get more comfortable without making noise. My left leg was starting to cramp. This seemed like a much better idea 5 minutes ago. That's when I heard the driver's door open. Finally, I thought, getting ready to surprise him. But instead of starting the car, Michael just sat there. I could hear him dialing his phone. "Hey, it's me," he said after a moment. "Yeah, I'm in the car now. We can talk." I stayed perfectly still, assuming he was calling Jessica or maybe one of our project managers. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze. "No, he has." The dismissive way he said "the old man" hit me like a physical blow. In 32 years, I'd never heard Michael refer to me like that. There was contempt in his voice, a coldness I didn't recognize. "Listen, Jessica, we need to move faster on this," he continued. "The Morrison project is going to be huge, and I'm not waiting another 5 years for him to retire. We need to take control now, Jessica." He was talking to his wife about me, about our business. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The small space in the back seat suddenly felt suffocating. "The plan is solid," Michael went on, his voice gaining confidence. "We have enough documentation of his erratic behavior, the missed meetings, the confusion about project details, the way he's been repeating himself in conversations with clients. Erratic behavior? Missed meetings? I racked my brain, trying to understand what he was referring to. Yes, I'd been tired lately, working long hours, but erratic. Dr. Peterson already said he'd be willing to testify about Dad's mental state if necessary. He's been our family physician for 15 years. His word would carry weight, Dr. Peterson. I'd been seeing him for routine checkups, some minor issues with blood pressure, occasional insomnia from work stress. What could he possibly testify about? "The key is making it look like he's no longer competent to run the company," Michael continued, and I could hear him getting more animated, more excited about whatever scheme he was describing. "We've been documenting everything. The times he's forgotten client names, when he mixed up project deadlines, that incident last month, when he seemed confused about the Henderson contract details. I remembered that day. I'd been dealing with 3 major projects simultaneously, and yes, I'd mixed up some details during a client meeting." Michael had smoothly stepped in to correct the information. I'd been grateful for his quick thinking and support. Now I realized he'd been cataloging my mistakes, storing them up to use against me. "Once we have enough evidence of his declining mental capacity, we can petition for legal guardianship," Michael said. "With medical testimony and documented business incompetence, a judge would have to consider it, especially with the company's financial interests at stake. Legal guardianship." The words echoed in my head. They wanted to have me declared legally incompetent. "Jessica, listen to me." Michael's voice became more intense. "This isn't just about the money, although obviously the business is worth millions now. It's about what I deserve. I've been working under his shadow for 8 years, doing the real work while he takes credit for everything. The Morrison project, that was my proposal, my relationships with the contractors, my negotiations with the city. But whose name is on all the contracts? Leonard Brooks. I felt something breaking inside my chest. Every late night we spent working together on that project, every strategy session, every problem we'd solved as a team, he saw it all as him working under my shadow. The timing couldn't be better, Michael continued. With the Morrison project about to launch, we need clear leadership. If Dad's capacity is questioned now, I can step in as the obvious successor. The board of directors would support it. They're already concerned about some of his recent decisions. Board of directors. We barely had a formal board, just myself, Michael, and our longtime accountant, Frank Morrison. When had Michael been talking to Frank about my recent decisions? I've been building relationships with our key clients for months, he went on. When this transition happens, it needs to be seamless. The last thing we want is for clients to lose confidence and jump to our competitors, building relationships behind my back. Every client dinner I thought we were attending together, every golf game, every project meeting, Michael had been positioning himself as my replacement. The beautiful part is, it doesn't have to be permanent, he said, and I could hear something like excitement in his voice. Once I have control of the company and Dad is safely managed in some kind of assisted living situation, we can review his condition periodically. But realistically, Jessica, once someone his age is declared incompetent, they rarely recover full legal capacity. Assisted living situation. They weren't just planning to take my business, they were planning to lock me away. I know this seems harsh, Michael said, and for a moment I heard something that sounded like the son I knew. But Dad's been slipping for months. You've seen it yourself. The repetitive stories, the confusion about dates, the way he gets angry when anyone questions his decisions. This is what's best for everyone, including him. Repetitive stories. I thought about the anecdotes I shared with clients, the lessons I tried to pass on to younger employees. Was I really repeating myself, or was Michael just tired of hearing about the history he'd be inheriting? The anger thing is key, he continued. Dr. Peterson says that sudden mood changes and increased irritability can be early signs of dementia or other cognitive decline. We just need to document a few more incidents of Dad losing his temper inappropriately. I realized with growing horror that Michael had been not just observing my behavior, but possibly provoking situations designed to make me lose my temper. How many of our recent arguments had been genuine disagreements, and how many had been Michael deliberately pushing my buttons for some twisted documentation? What about the will? Jessica's voice came through the phone speaker, tinny but clear enough for me to hear. If Leonard is declared incompetent, does that affect his testament? That's the genius part, Michael replied. The current will leaves everything to me anyway. The business, the house, his investment portfolio, everything. But if he's incompetent, he can't change it. No last-minute decisions to donate money to charity, no surprise bequests to employees, nothing. What's written now is what we get. They had clearly studied this plan from every angle. Legal, medical, financial. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment scheme. This was methodical, calculated, and designed to destroy everything I thought I knew about my son and my future. So what's our timeline? Jessica asked. I'm thinking we make our move right after his birthday next week, Michael said. I'll arrange for him to have what looks like a significant episode, maybe during the birthday dinner, in front of witnesses. Something that clearly demonstrates he's not capable of making rational decisions anymore. My birthday. They were planning to destroy me at my own birthday celebration. I've already talked to Tom Richardson about being there, Michael continued. He's a psychiatrist, and he's married to Jessica's sister. If he witnesses Dad having some kind of breakdown, his professional opinion would be invaluable in court. Tom Richardson. I'd met him several times at family gatherings. A quiet, serious man who always seemed to be observing everyone. I'd thought he was just naturally analytical. Now I realized he'd been evaluating me for Michael's scheme. What kind of episode are we talking about? Jessica asked. Michael was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had a cold, calculating tone that I'd never heard from him before. I've been thinking about that. What if Dad suddenly became convinced that someone was stealing from the company? What if he started making accusations against long-time employees, getting paranoid, maybe even physically aggressive when people tried to calm him down? They were planning to make me look paranoid and violent. The irony was devastating. Here I was, discovering an actual conspiracy against me, while they planned to make it look like I was imagining threats that didn't exist. I had to bite my knuckle to keep from making any noise. Tears were streaming down my face, and I felt like I was going to be sick. This was my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, walked down the aisle at his wedding. The young man I'd been so proud to bring into the family business, the person I'd trusted with my life. The hardest part will be acting surprised when it happens, Michael said. I need to look like the concerned son who's been worried about Dad's behavior, but hoped it would get better on its own. When he has his episode at the birthday dinner, I'll be the one trying to calm him down. The one suggesting maybe he needs professional help. You're going to be great at it, Jessica said, and I could hear the admiration in her voice. You've always been good at managing people's perceptions. Is that what Michael thought he'd been doing with me all these years? Managing my perceptions while planning my destruction. The key is that everyone needs to see it as a tragedy, not a takeover, Michael continued. Poor Leonard Brooks, such a successful businessman, but age and stress have finally caught up with him. Thank God his son is capable of stepping in to preserve everything Leonard built. He had even crafted the narrative that would follow my downfall. In his version, he was the hero saving the company from his failing father. What about the employees? Jessica asked. Some of them have been loyal to Leonard for years. They might resist the transition. I've been thinking about that too, Michael said. Frank Morrison is already on board. He's been concerned about Dad's decision-making for months. As for the others, once Dad is out of the picture, they'll need to adapt or find new jobs. The company will be more efficient without all the dead weight Dad's been carrying. Dead weight. He was talking about people I'd known for years. Employees who'd helped build this company, who I considered friends. I'm particularly looking forward to getting rid of Tommy Rodriguez, Michael continued. Dad's been way too sentimental about him, keeping him on despite his productivity issues. The guy's been coasting for years just because he helped Dad start the business. Tommy Rodriguez had been with me for 23 years. He'd worked beside me through economic downturns, family emergencies, and every challenge we'd faced. Yes, he was slower than he used to be. The man was 61 years old, but his experience and loyalty were invaluable. To Michael, he was just dead weight. Once I'm in control, we're going to run this company like a real business, not like Dad's personal charity project, Michael said. Profit margins will improve dramatically once we eliminate the inefficiencies. Everything I'd tried to teach him about treating employees fairly, about building a company culture based on respect and loyalty, had apparently been dismissed as inefficiency. I should get going, Michael said. I told Dad I had dinner with your parents tonight, so I need to maintain that story. The last thing we want is for him to get suspicious now when we're so close. Dinner with her parents. Another lie. How many of his recent excuses had been fabrications? How many times had he looked me in the eye and lied while plotting my destruction? Love you, Jess, he said. This time next month everything changes. Love you too, Jessica replied. And Michael, I'm proud of you for doing what needs to be done. It takes courage to make hard decisions like this. Courage. She thought destroying me took courage. I heard him end the call and start the engine. My mind was racing, trying to process everything I'd heard, trying to figure out what to do next. Should I confront him immediately? Should I pretend this never happened and try to figure out my own plan? As Michael pulled out of the parking lot, I remained huddled in the back seat, invisible and forgotten, just like he planned to make me in life. The man driving this car wasn't the son I'd raised. He was a stranger who happened to share my DNA and my name. The 15-minute drive to Michael's house felt like hours. I stayed curled up behind the driver's seat, listening to him hum, along with the radio, like he hadn't just finished planning my complete destruction. How could someone plot something so elaborate and then listen to classic rock like it was any other day? At one point his phone rang again. I tensed, hoping for more information, but it was just a colleague asking about some project details. Michael handled the conversation professionally, competently. This was the son I knew, intelligent, articulate, good at his job. But now I understood that these very qualities made him more dangerous, not less. When we pulled into his driveway, I faced a new problem. How do I get out of this car without him seeing me? I waited until I heard him unlock his front door and go inside before carefully emerging from the back seat. My legs were cramped, my back ached, and I felt decades older than I had 2 hours ago. I walked to my truck, which I'd parked a block away, before implementing my surprise plan. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd gotten my surprise, just not the one I'd expected. As I drove home to my empty house, empty since Sarah and I divorced 3 years ago, empty of the family warmth I'd thought I was building, I tried to make sense of what I'd learned. Michael wasn't just planning to steal my business. He was planning to erase me entirely. In his version of events, I would become a tragic figure, a man whose mind had failed him, who needed to be managed for his own good. The most devastating part wasn't the betrayal itself, but how thoroughly he'd studied me to make it work. Every weakness, every mistake, every human moment of confusion or irritation had been catalogued as evidence of my incompetence. The son I'd trusted most in the world had been building a case against me for months, maybe years. I thought about all the conversations we'd had recently, all the times he'd asked leading questions about my memory, my decisions, my stress levels. I'd thought he was being caring and concerned. Now I realized he'd been gathering ammunition. Pulling into my garage, I sat in my truck for a long time before going inside. My house felt different now. Not like a home I was maintaining until retirement, but like a piece of property that Michael was already planning to inherit. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, every relationship I'd cultivated, was apparently just a stepping stone in his plan to replace me. The hardest part was understanding how completely I'd misread him. This wasn't a good son making a difficult decision about an aging father. This was a calculating individual who'd been pretending to care about me while orchestrating my downfall. The Michael in that car today wasn't someone I'd ever met before. Yet he'd been living in my house, working in my office, calling me Dad for years. I kept thinking about his phrase, "This time next month, everything changes. In 30 days, if his plan worked, I would be legally incompetent, institutionalized, and stripped of everything I'd spent my adult life building. Michael would be president of Brooks and Associates, living in my house, controlling my money, and telling people what a tragedy it was that his father's mind had failed him. But there was one thing Michael didn't know, one variable he hadn't accounted for in his careful planning. I'd heard every word. For the first time in months, I had an... Before I continue with what happened next, I want to ask you something. If this story is touching you in any way, if you're feeling the weight of what I discovered about my own son, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything, and it helps me share these difficult truths with others who might be going through similar betrayals in their own families. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Michael's voice saying, "The old man is completely clueless," with that cold contempt I'd never heard before. I kept replaying every conversation we'd had over the past few months, looking for signs I'd missed, clues that might have warned me about what was coming. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up trying to sleep and went to my home office. I pulled out a legal pad and started writing down everything I could remember from that phone conversation. Every detail, every name mentioned, every part of their plan. If Michael thought he could document my supposed incompetence, then I would document his actual conspiracy. Dr. Peterson willing to testify about my mental state. Frank Morrison already expressing concerns about my decision-making. Tom Richardson, the psychiatrist, positioned to witness my planned episode at my birthday dinner. Michael had been methodical about recruiting allies, and I'd been completely blind to it. I thought about Frank Morrison, our accountant for the past 12 years. A quiet, serious man who'd always been professional but never particularly warm. I'd attributed his reserved nature to his personality, but now I wondered how long Michael had been working on him, planting seeds of doubt about my competence. The most disturbing realization was how Michael had been using my own trust against me. Every time I'd confided in him about feeling stressed or overwhelmed, every moment of uncertainty I'd shared about a business decision, every human weakness I'd shown him as a father, he'd been storing it all away as evidence for his case. As the sun came up, I made myself coffee and tried to think strategically. Michael expected me to be clueless, so my first advantage was that he had no idea I knew about his plan. But what could I actually do with that knowledge? I couldn't just confront him directly. He'd deny everything, claim I was paranoid, and it would only accelerate his timeline. Worse, it might give him the episode he was looking for, his father making wild accusations without proof. I needed evidence. Real, documented proof of what Michael was planning. But how do you prove a conspiracy when the conspirators are your own family and trusted colleagues? That's when I remembered something Michael had said during that phone call. We've been documenting everything. If they were building a file on me, then somewhere there had to be physical evidence of their scheme. Notes, emails, recorded conversations, medical consultations with Dr. Peterson. I spent Wednesday morning going through my routine as normally as possible. I went to the office, reviewed project reports, attended a client meeting. But all day, I was studying everyone differently. When Frank Morrison stopped by to discuss some financial projections, I found myself analyzing every word, looking for signs of the concern Michael claimed he'd been expressing. "Leonard, are you feeling all right?" Frank asked at one point. "You seem distracted today." Was this genuine concern, or was this part of the documentation Michael mentioned? Was Frank making mental notes about my distraction to add to their file? "Just thinking about the Morrison project," I replied, watching his reaction carefully. "Big responsibility, making sure we handle everything properly." Frank nodded slowly. "Yes, it's a significant undertaking. Have you considered bringing in additional project management support? Someone to help with the day-to-day oversight?" Additional project management support. Someone like Michael, perhaps? Was this Frank's way of suggesting I was overwhelmed, incapable of handling the project myself? "I think Michael and I have it well in hand," I said carefully. "We make a good team, of course," Frank agreed, but something in his tone felt off. "Michael certainly has shown a lot of initiative on this project." There it was, the subtle undermining, the gentle suggestion that Michael was the one really running things. How many of these conversations had Frank been having with clients, with other employees, with Michael himself? After Frank left, I sat in my office thinking about how expertly this had all been orchestrated. Michael wasn't just planning to have me declared incompetent. He was creating a narrative that would make everyone believe it was inevitable, even merciful. That afternoon, I made a decision that would have seemed paranoid just days earlier, but now felt absolutely necessary. I was going to start documenting everything myself. If Michael could build a file of my supposed incompetence, I could build a file of his actual betrayal. I drove to Best Buy and purchased a small digital recording device, the kind private investigators use. The salesman, a young kid who couldn't have been much older than Michael, showed me how to use it. This model has a really sensitive microphone, he explained enthusiastically. You can pick up conversations from pretty far away, and the battery lasts for hours. I felt like I was buying tools for espionage against my own family. But what choice did I have? Michael had been spying on me for months, cataloging my every weakness. It was time to level the playing field. Thursday morning, I came to the office early and planted the recording device in the conference room where Michael often took private phone calls. I felt ridiculous, like some kind of corporate spy, but I needed proof of what I'd heard in his car. Around 10 o'clock, I saw Michael go into the conference room and close the door. From my office, I could see him through the glass walls, pacing as he talked on his phone. 20 minutes later, he emerged and went back to his desk. I waited another hour before retrieving the device. My hands were shaking as I played back the recording in my office, with the door locked. Michael's voice came through clearly. "Tom, it's Michael Brooks. We talked about my father's situation last week." My heart pounded as I heard Tom Richardson's response. "Yes, Michael, I've been thinking about what you described. The episodes of confusion, the angry outbursts, the repetitive behavior, these can certainly be early indicators of cognitive decline." "That's what I was afraid of," Michael replied, and he actually sounded concerned, worried. If I hadn't heard that cold conversation in his car, I might have believed his performance. "It's been getting worse lately. Yesterday, he seemed confused about a project timeline we'd discussed multiple times. And last week, he got unreasonably angry with one of our long-term employees over a minor issue. That incident with the employee, it had been a legitimate disagreement about safety protocols. The employee had been cutting corners, and I'd been firm about following proper procedures. But in Michael's version, it became an unreasonable, angry outburst. "Michael, I need to be clear about something," Tom said. "I can't provide a diagnosis without a proper examination. But if your father's behavior continues to deteriorate, especially if it affects his business judgment or becomes a danger to himself or others, there are legal options available." "Legal options? Conservatorship proceedings? If you can demonstrate that your father lacks the capacity to make important decisions about his finances or health, a court can appoint someone else to make those decisions for him." "Would that be permanent?" "Not necessarily, but these situations rarely improve, especially at his age. The stress of running a large business can accelerate cognitive decline. Sometimes the most loving thing a family can do is ensure their loved one is properly cared for and protected from making decisions that could harm them or others. Protected from making decisions. They were going to take away my right to make my own choices and call it protection. I appreciate you taking time to talk with me about this, Tom. I hope it doesn't come to that. But it's good to know what options exist if Dad's condition continues to worsen. Of course, Michael. And remember, if you do decide to move forward with any kind of legal action, having professional medical testimony will be crucial. Dr. Peterson's observations as his longtime physician would carry significant weight, especially if combined with testimony from someone like myself who's observed the behavioral changes. After the call ended, I sat in my office staring at the recording device. This wasn't just a son concerned about his father's health. This was a calculated campaign to strip me of my legal rights and my life's work. But now I had proof. That evening, I drove to a different part of town and met with Rebecca Martinez, a lawyer I'd found through online research. I chose her specifically because she specialized in elder law and had experience with contested conservatorship cases. More importantly, She had no connection to anyone Michael might know in Denver's legal community. Rebecca was a sharp woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and a direct manner. I played her the recording of Michael's conversation with Tom Richardson, Mr. Brooks, she said after listening carefully. This recording suggests that your son is actively building a case to have you declared legally incompetent. However, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Go ahead. Have you been experiencing any of the symptoms they described? Memory issues, confusion about business matters, increased irritability. I thought carefully before answering. I've been under a lot of stress with our biggest project ever. Yes, sometimes I'm tired. Sometimes I need to double-check details I might have remembered more easily a few years ago. But confused. Incompetent? No, the business is doing better than ever. Rebecca nodded. Stress and aging can cause temporary cognitive effects that might be misinterpreted or deliberately exaggerated by someone building a case. The key question is whether you're actually incompetent to manage your affairs, or whether someone is trying to make you appear incompetent. What can I do? Several things. First, we need to document your actual mental competence. I can arrange for you to be evaluated by an independent neuropsychologist, someone with no connection to Dr. Peterson or Tom Richardson. Second, we need to gather evidence of this conspiracy. That recording is a good start, but we need more. What kind of evidence? Emails, text messages, financial records showing how your son might benefit from gaining control of your business. Any documentation of meetings or conversations where this plan was discussed. The more we can prove this is calculated rather than medically necessary, the stronger your case. Rebecca leaned forward in her chair. Mr. Brooks, I have to warn you, this kind of family situation can get very ugly very quickly. If your son is willing to go this far, he's unlikely to back down just because you've discovered his plan. Are you prepared for what might be a very public, very painful legal battle? I thought about everything I'd worked for, everyone I employed, the legacy I'd hoped to pass on to Michael before I learned who he really was. Counselor, I said. 3 days ago, I thought my biggest problem was whether to give my son a promotion for his birthday. Now I find out he's been systematically planning to destroy me and steal everything I've built. He's already made this ugly. I'm just trying to survive it. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove up to the mountains to think. Sarah and I used to have a cabin near Breckenridge, but she got it in the divorce. Instead, I rented a small place in Keystone and spent 2 days walking trails and trying to process what my life had become. The hardest part wasn't even Michael's betrayal, though that cut deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. The hardest part was realizing how many other relationships might be compromised. If Michael could turn Frank Morrison against me, if he could recruit Dr. Peterson and Tom Richardson to his cause, how many other people in my life were part of this conspiracy? What about my employees? People like Tommy Rodriguez, who Michael was planning to fire as dead weight. Did they suspect something was wrong? Had Michael already started poisoning them against me? What about my clients? Michael said he'd been building relationships with them for months. How many of those relationships were actually Michael positioning himself as my replacement? I spent Saturday evening in that small cabin making lists. People I could trust, people I couldn't trust, people I wasn't sure about. The can trust list was disturbingly short. On Sunday, as I drove back to Denver, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just a week earlier. I was going to fight back, not just defensively, not just trying to protect myself from Michael's scheme, but actively. If Michael wanted a war, he was going to get one, but I was going to be smarter about it than he expected. Michael thought I was a declining old man, clueless and easy to manipulate. He had no idea that I'd spent 28 years building a business by outmaneuvering competitors, solving complex problems, and making difficult decisions under pressure. My son had made one crucial mistake in his planning. He'd underestimated his father. Monday morning, I walked into Brooks & Associates with a plan of my own. Michael was already at his desk, looking confident and relaxed. He smiled when he saw me, that same fake smile I now recognized from our recent conversations. "Morning, Dad. How was your weekend?" "Restful," I replied, studying his face carefully. "Sometimes it's good to get away and think about the future." "Absolutely," Michael agreed. "Speaking of the future, I was thinking we should have a more formal discussion about long-term planning for the company. Maybe after your birthday celebration next week?" "My birthday celebration? The event where he was planning to destroy me publicly. That sounds like a good idea, son," I said, matching his false warmth with my own. "There are definitely some changes coming that we need to discuss." If only he knew how true that was. That afternoon, I implemented the first phase of my counterattack. I scheduled individual meetings with every key employee at Brooks & Associates, ostensibly to discuss their career development and future with the company. But really, I was trying to determine who might be loyal to me versus who Michael might have already turned. The conversation with Tommy Rodriguez was particularly revealing. "Tommy, you've been with me almost from the beginning," I said, sitting across from him in my office. "I want to make sure you feel valued and that you're happy with your role here." Tommy, a stocky man with graying hair and calloused hands from decades of construction work, looked uncomfortable with the formal setting. "Mr. Brooks, you know, I appreciate everything you've done for me over the years. This company gave me opportunities I never would have had anywhere else." I sense a but coming. Tommy shifted in his chair. "Well, it's just that some of the younger folks around here sometimes make comments about how things could be more efficient, more modern. They don't always appreciate the way you do things." "What kind of comments?" "Nothing disrespectful," Tommy said quickly. "Just talk about how the company could grow faster, make more profit, if we streamlined some operations." Streamlined operations. Michael's influence, no doubt. "Tommy, if there were changes coming to how this company operates, how would you feel about that?" "Honestly, Mr. Brooks, I'm 61 years old. I've got 4 more years until I can retire with full benefits. I just want to do my job, take care of my family, and not cause any trouble for anybody. And if someone tried to make trouble for you..." Tommy looked directly at me for the first time in the conversation. "Then I'd hope the man who gave me my start would remember that loyalty goes both ways." That was exactly what I needed to hear. Tommy was still on my side, but he was scared. Michael's campaign was already creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear among longtime employees. My conversation with Maria Santos, our office manager for the past 6 years, was even more illuminating. "Maria, I've been noticing some tension around the office lately. Is everything okay?" Maria, normally cheerful and outgoing, seemed nervous. "Well, Mr. Brooks, there has been some talk." "What kind of talk?" "People are wondering about the future, about what happens when you retire, about whether their jobs will be secure during a transition." "Who's been discussing my retirement?" "I haven't announced any plans to retire." "Oh, no one's saying you have. It's just that Michael has been having conversations with people about preparing for eventual changes. He says he wants to make sure everyone feels secure and that the company continues to grow." Michael had been conducting his own employee meetings, preparing them for my departure without my knowledge. "Maria, has anyone suggested that I might not be capable of continuing to run the company?" She looked genuinely shocked by the question. "Oh, no, Mr. Brooks. Nothing like that, although..." She paused, looking uncomfortable. "Although what?" "Well, Frank Morrison did mention that you've seemed stressed lately. He wondered if maybe you were taking on too much responsibility and might benefit from delegating more authority to Michael." There it was again. The gentle undermining, the suggestion that I was overwhelmed and needed Michael to take over more responsibilities. By the end of that week, I had a clearer picture of Michael's campaign. He'd been subtle but systematic, planting seeds of doubt about my capacity while positioning himself as the natural successor. He hadn't directly told anyone I was incompetent, but he'd created an atmosphere where people were expecting a transition and looking to him for leadership. Meanwhile, I'd been gathering my own evidence. I had recordings of 3 more phone conversations between Michael and various allies in his scheme. I had copies of emails between Michael and Frank Morrison discussing Leonard's declining decision-making abilities. I had documentation of Michael's unauthorized meetings with our clients, ostensibly about project updates, but actually about building relationships for his eventual takeover. Most importantly, I had an independent psychological evaluation from Dr. Sarah Chen, a neuropsychologist with impeccable credentials who confirmed that I showed no signs of cognitive decline or incompetence. In fact, her report stated that I demonstrated above-average cognitive function for his age group and was fully capable of managing complex business and personal decisions. Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after I'd hidden in Michael's car, I was ready to make my move. I called Michael into my office and closed the door. "Son, I want to talk to you about something important." Michael settled into the chair across from my desk, looking relaxed and confident. "Sure, Dad, what's on your mind?" "Your birthday is tomorrow, and I've been thinking about what kind of gift would be most meaningful." "Dad, you know you don't need to get me anything expensive. Your presence at dinner tomorrow night is gift enough. Your presence at dinner tomorrow night." The dinner, where he was planning to destroy me in front of witnesses. "Well, I think what I have in mind is something you'll find very valuable," I said, opening my desk drawer and pulling out a thick folder. "It's something I've been working on for quite some time now." Michael leaned forward slightly, probably expecting the promotion papers I'd originally planned to surprise him with. "You know, Michael, one of the most important things I've learned in business is that information is power. The person who has the most complete information usually wins." "That's true," Michael agreed, still not sensing any danger. "For instance, if someone were planning a hostile takeover of a company, they'd want to gather as much information as possible about their target. Financial records, evidence of mismanagement, documentation of the current leadership's incompetence." Michael's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. They might even recruit allies inside the company, people who could testify about the target's declining abilities. Maybe they'd get medical professionals to question the person's mental capacity. Now, Michael was definitely paying attention, his body language becoming more tense. "Dad, what are you getting at?" I opened the folder and pulled out the transcript of his phone conversation with Jessica from that day in his car. "I'm getting at this, son. The old man is completely clueless. That's what you said about me last Tuesday while I was sitting in the back seat of your car." The color drained from Michael's face. "You see, Michael, you were wrong about one thing. I'm not clueless. And now I have something you don't expect, complete information about your little conspiracy." I spread out the documents on my desk, recordings, transcripts, emails, medical evaluations, legal consultations. "Did you really think you could systematically plan my destruction and I wouldn't notice? Did you think you could turn my own doctor, my own accountant, my own business against me, and I'd just quietly accept it?" Michael stared at the papers, his mouth slightly open, as he realized the scope of what I'd discovered. "Dad, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can. You're very good at explanations, at managing people's perceptions, as Jessica put it. But here's what's going to happen instead." I leaned back in my chair, feeling more in control than I had in weeks. "Tomorrow night at your birthday dinner, the only surprise is going to—" Michael sat in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity, staring at the evidence spread across my desk. I could see his mind racing, trying to figure out how much I knew. How much damage had been done to his carefully laid plans. "Dad," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you don't understand. I was trying to help you." "Help me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "By having me declared mentally incompetent? By planning to lock me in an assisted living facility? By stealing my life's work? That's your idea of help?" Michael's composure was cracking. The confident, calculated man I'd heard in that phone conversation was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely panicked. "You've been making mistakes," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Real mistakes, Dad. The Henderson contract confusion, forgetting client names, the way you've been repeating stories. I was genuinely worried about you. So worried that you decided to secretly build a legal case against me instead of talking to me directly. So worried that you recruited my own doctor to testify about my supposed mental decline. Dr. Peterson shares my concerns. Dr. Peterson shares your lies," I interrupted, pulling out Dr. Chen's psychological evaluation. "This is an independent assessment of my mental capacity, conducted by one of the most respected neuropsychologists in Colorado. According to her, I'm not only competent, I'm functioning at above-average levels for my age." Michael's eyes darted to the report, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my son's face: genuine fear. "Michael, I want you to listen to me very carefully," I said, leaning forward across my desk. "Tomorrow night at your birthday dinner, you had planned to stage some kind of episode to make me look incompetent in front of witnesses. That's not going to happen. Dad, please. Instead, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit there quietly while I share some very interesting recordings with our dinner guests. Tom Richardson is going to hear his own voice discussing how to build a conservatorship case against me. Frank Morrison is going to explain to everyone why he's been undermining my authority. And you're going to explain to Jessica's parents, to all our friends and family, exactly why you thought it was acceptable to systematically destroy your own father." Michael's face had gone from pale to almost grey. "You can't do that. It would ruin everything. Everything for who? For you? Because from where I'm sitting, you already ruined everything the moment you decided I was just an obstacle to overcome." "That's not how I see you," Michael said, and for a moment he sounded like the son I remembered. "Dad, the business has grown so much, the pressure is enormous. I thought if I could take some of that burden off your shoulders by having me declared legally incompetent. I thought it might be temporary, just until you could get some help, some rest. Michael, stop lying to me. I heard every word of your conversation with Jessica. You said yourself that once someone my age is declared incompetent, they rarely recover full legal capacity. You were planning to lock me away permanently. The fight seemed to go out of him then. His shoulders sagged, and he looked at his hands rather than meeting my eyes. "What do you want from me?" he asked quietly. "I want you to resign from Brooks & Associates, effective immediately. I want you to sign a document agreeing never to contest my will or attempt any legal action regarding my mental capacity. And I want you to understand that as of today, you are no longer my heir." Michael's head snapped up. "Dad, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You want to know what real incompetence looks like? It's a son who thinks he can betray his father and still inherit everything his father built. What about Jessica? What about our future? The house you helped us buy, the life we've built? You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy mine." Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. You're proving my point about your mental state. You're being paranoid, irrational." "Sit down," I said quietly, but something in my tone made him freeze. "You want to see irrational? Keep pushing me, son. Because right now, I'm being remarkably restrained considering what you've done." He sat back down, but his jaw was clenched with anger. "You have 24 hours to clean out your office," I continued. "I'll have security escort you out if necessary." "And Michael?" If you even think about trying to salvage your plan, if you make one move against me or this company, I will not only expose everything at your birthday dinner, I will make sure every business contact in Denver knows exactly what kind of person you are. You're destroying our family, Michael said, his voice breaking slightly. I'm not destroying anything. You did that the moment you started planning my destruction. I'm just refusing to be your victim. After Michael left my office, I sat alone for a long time, looking out the window at the city I'd helped build through my work. 28 years of 12-hour days, missed family dinners, weekend site visits, and constant worry about meeting payroll and keeping clients happy. Also, I could pass something meaningful on to my son. The irony was crushing. Everything I'd sacrificed to build this legacy for Michael, he was willing to steal from me without a second thought. That evening, I drove to Jessica and Michael's house. I needed to have a conversation with my daughter-in-law, the woman I'd welcomed into our family, the woman who'd been enthusiastically supporting Michael's plan to destroy me. Jessica answered the door, looking surprised to see me. "Leonard!" "Michael didn't mention you were coming by. He doesn't know I'm here. I need to talk with you, Jessica, privately." She invited me in, and we sat in their living room. The living room in the house I'd helped them buy, furnished with wedding gifts I'd paid for, in the life I'd helped them create. "Jessica, I know about the plan." Her face went through the same transformation I'd seen in Michael's office. Confusion, then recognition, then fear. "I don't know what you mean. I know about the conservatorship plan. I know about your conversations with Michael about having me declared incompetent. I know about Tom Richardson's involvement, about the timeline, about everything." Jessica stared at me for a moment. Then her expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Good," she said simply. "Then you know this is inevitable. Michael has been protecting you from yourself for months, Leonard. The mistakes you've been making, the stress you've been under, it's affecting your judgment." "My judgment?" "Jessica, I've built a multi-million-dollar company. I employ 47 people. I'm handling the biggest project in our company's history. Exactly which part of that suggests impaired judgment? The part where you're so stressed and overwhelmed that you can't see how much help you need," she replied. "Michael loves you, Leonard, we both do. But love sometimes means making hard decisions for someone's own good." "Hard decisions? You mean like committing fraud to steal my business?" "We're not stealing anything. We're preserving what you built before your condition gets worse and you destroy it yourself." The casual certainty in her voice was almost more disturbing than Michael's calculated planning. Jessica genuinely believed she was doing the right thing, which somehow made it even worse. "Jessica, I want you to understand something very clearly. There is no condition. I've been independently evaluated by a neuropsychologist who confirms I'm completely competent. What you and Michael have been interpreting as decline is just normal stress and fatigue from working too hard. One evaluation doesn't change months of observed behavior, months of behavior that you and Michael have been deliberately misinterpreting to support a predetermined conclusion." Jessica stood up abruptly. "I think you should leave, Leonard. You're proving our point right now. This paranoid thinking, these accusations." "Paranoid thinking?" "Jessica, I have recordings of Michael discussing this conspiracy. I have emails. I have documentation of meetings you thought I didn't know about. This isn't paranoia when there's an actual conspiracy." For the first time, Jessica looked genuinely uncertain. "Even if that's true," she said finally, "it doesn't change the fact that Michael is better equipped to run the business now. He's younger, more energetic, more in touch with modern business practices. Then he should have started his own company instead of trying to steal mine. It's not stealing when it's his inheritance anyway. It was his inheritance. Before he decided to betray me, it was going to be his. Now," I shrugged, "now I'm reconsidering everything." I could see the impact of that statement hitting her. All the planning, all the careful maneuvering, all the anticipated wealth and security, suddenly in jeopardy. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Michael made his choice when he decided to systematically plan my destruction. Now he gets to live with the consequences of that choice. I stood to leave, then turned back to her. Jessica, you're young, you're intelligent, and you've got your whole life ahead of you. But you've made a terrible mistake aligning yourself with Michael's scheme. If you have any wisdom at all, you'll convince him to back down before this gets any uglier. And if we don't, then tomorrow night at the birthday dinner, instead of witnessing my supposed breakdown, everyone is going to learn exactly what kind of people you and Michael really are. I drove home that night feeling emotionally drained, but oddly relieved. For the first time in a week, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny again. Michael's plan had depended on my ignorance and passivity. Now that I knew everything and had evidence to back up my knowledge, the power dynamic had completely shifted. But I also felt profoundly sad. This wasn't how I'd imagined my relationship with my son ending up. I dreamed of working together, of teaching him everything I knew, of gradually transitioning the business to him when I was ready to retire. Instead, he'd forced me into a position where I had to treat him as an enemy. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, typical Denver weather for early October. Michael's birthday, what should have been a celebration, was going to be something very different. I spent the morning reviewing all my evidence one more time, making sure I had everything organized for the evening's confrontation. Rebecca Martinez had advised me to be thorough, but not vindictive. Present the facts clearly, she'd said. Let people draw their own conclusions about Michael's character. Don't attack him personally. Just let his own actions speak for themselves. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Michael. Dad, we need to talk. I think we said everything we needed to say yesterday. Please. Before tonight. There has to be a way to work this out. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where neither of us would feel comfortable making a scene. Michael was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table looking like he hadn't slept. The confident, calculating man I'd discovered in his car was gone. This was just a scared young man who'd realized his carefully laid plans were falling apart. Dad, I want to apologize. For what, specifically? For all of it. For the planning, for the deception, for betraying your trust. I studied his face carefully. Are you apologizing because you're genuinely sorry, or because you got caught? Michael was quiet for a long moment. Both, I guess. Maybe I started with good intentions, worrying about your stress levels, but somewhere along the way, it became about something else. It became about greed. It became about impatience, he corrected, about feeling like I was ready to take on more responsibility and not wanting to wait for you to decide when to hand it over. So, you decided to take it by force. I decided to create a situation where the transition would happen, sooner rather than later, by having me declared mentally incompetent. Michael winced. That was Jessica's idea, actually. She said it would be cleaner, more definitive than just waiting for you to retire. And you went along with it. I went along with it because I convinced myself it was temporary, that it was just a way to get you to slow down and take care of yourself. I leaned back in my chair, studying my son's face. He looked genuinely remorseful, but I'd been fooled by his performances before. Michael, do you understand what you put me through this past week? Do you have any idea what it feels like to discover that your own son, the person you trust most in the world, has been systematically planning your destruction? Tears started forming in Michael's eyes. Dad, I never wanted to hurt you. You wanted what I built without earning it yourself. You wanted the respect and authority that come with leadership without demonstrating that you deserved them. That's not fair. I've been working my ass off for 8 years, working towards stealing my company, not earning it. I wasn't stealing it. It was gonna be mine anyway. Was being the operative phrase. Michael stared at me across the table. So what happens now? You destroy me tonight in front of everyone, then what? You run the company alone until you drop dead at your desk? I don't know. But I know I won't be handing it over to someone who tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. Dad, please. There has to be a way to fix this. I thought about everything that had happened, everything I'd discovered, everything I'd lost in the past week. Michael, here's what I'll offer you. You resign from Brooks & Associates immediately. You sign a legal document acknowledging that you attempted to defraud me and agreeing never to contest my will or attempt legal action regarding my mental capacity. You publicly apologize to me tonight in front of everyone at your birthday dinner, and in exchange, I won't play the recordings. I won't expose exactly how calculating and manipulative your plan was. I'll let you keep some dignity while you figure out what to do with the rest of your life. What about my future? What about Jessica? What about the house? What about them? You should have considered those things before you decided to betray me. The house payments are your responsibility now. You wanted to be independent, to run your own life without your father's interference. Congratulations. You got your wish. Michael sat there for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. This is really it, isn't it? He said finally. This is how our relationship ends. You ended our relationship the moment you started building a case to have me declared incompetent. I'm just acknowledging what you already did. I love you, Dad. No, Michael. You loved what I could give you. You loved the business you thought you'd inherit, the money you'd control, the respect you'd command. But you've never loved me enough to be honest with me, to work with me instead of against me, to earn what you wanted instead of trying to steal it. That's not true. Then why didn't you just talk to me? If you thought I was working too hard, if you thought I needed help, if you wanted more responsibility, why didn't you just have an honest conversation with your father instead of plotting with lawyers and doctors behind my back? Michael had no answer for that because we both knew the truth. An honest conversation might not have given him what he wanted when he wanted it. The conspiracy was faster, more certain, more profitable. I need an answer, Michael. Do you accept my offer, or do I tell everyone tonight exactly what you've been planning? If I resign, what happens to the company? That's not your concern anymore. Dad, you can't run it alone forever. You need a successor. I'll find one. Someone who earns the position through merit, instead of trying to steal it through fraud. Michael's face hardened slightly. You're making a mistake. I know that business better than anyone. You know some aspects of the business, but you clearly don't know anything about integrity, loyalty, or family values. And those are the foundations everything else is built on. Fine, Michael said finally. I'll resign. I'll sign whatever document you want. But I want you to know that you're destroying more than just my career. You're destroying any chance we have of being a family again. We stopped being a family the moment you decided to betray me. Everything else is just paperwork. That evening, I arrived at the restaurant where we'd planned to celebrate Michael's birthday. It was an upscale steakhouse in downtown Denver, the kind of place where we'd celebrated family milestones for years. Jessica's parents were already there, along with Tom Richardson and his wife, Frank Morrison and his wife, and several other family friends and business associates. Michael and Jessica arrived a few minutes after me, both looking tense and uncomfortable. They'd obviously spent the day discussing my ultimatum and deciding how to handle the evening. As we all sat down at the large table, I felt strangely calm. After a week of feeling like a victim, like someone whose life was spiraling out of control, I was finally in a position to set things right. Before we order, I said, standing up at the head of the table, I'd like to say a few words about my son on his birthday. The table fell quiet, everyone turning to look at me expectantly. Michael's face was pale, but he nodded slightly, our agreed-upon signal that he was accepting my offer. 32 years ago, I began, Jessica's parents and I welcomed a son into the world. We had such hopes for him, such dreams about the man he would become. We taught him about honesty, about hard work, about family loyalty. I paused, looking around the table at all the faces, some genuinely warm and caring, others that I now realized had been part of Michael's conspiracy. Today I'm announcing that Michael will be leaving Brooks and Associates to pursue other opportunities. After 8 years with the company, he's decided it's time to build his own path, to create his own legacy rather than inheriting mine. There were surprised murmurs around the table. Frank Morrison looked particularly shocked. Michael has realized that sometimes the most important thing a son can do is prove he can succeed independently, without relying on his father's achievements. I'm proud of him for making this difficult but mature decision. Michael stood up slowly. Thank you, Dad. You've taught me everything I know about business. And now it's time for me to use those lessons to build something of my own. It was a graceful exit, preserving his dignity while acknowledging his departure. I could see the relief in his eyes that I wasn't exposing the real reasons for his resignation. I'd also like to announce, I continued, that I'll be implementing some changes at Brooks and Associates. We'll be promoting several long-time employees to leadership positions, and I'll be bringing in some new talent to help guide the company's future. Tom Richardson raised his glass. To new beginnings and family traditions, everyone toasted, but I noticed that Michael barely touched his drink to his lips. The dinner proceeded normally after that, with conversations about business, family news, and local events. But there was an undercurrent of tension that everyone could feel, even if they didn't understand its source. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Michael approached me at the bar. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for handling it the way you did." "Don't thank me yet. You still need to sign the documents, and you still need to figure out how to pay your own bills." "I know, but you could have humiliated me tonight and you didn't. Michael, I want you to understand something. I didn't protect your dignity tonight for your sake. I did it for mine, because despite everything you've done, you're still my son, and I still remember the boy I raised before you became this. Maybe someday." "No," I interrupted. "There's no someday here. What you did was unforgivable. I'm letting you leave with some dignity intact, but we're done. Permanently. Dad, I'm not your dad anymore, Michael. I'm just someone you used to know, and with that I walked away from my son for the last time." 3 weeks had passed since Michael's birthday dinner, and I thought the worst was behind me. Michael had signed the documents, cleaned out his office, and supposedly moved on with his life. Jessica had been cold but civil during the few interactions we'd had while they figured out their financial situation. I assumed I could finally start rebuilding and moving forward. I was wrong. It started with small things that didn't quite add up. Clients asking questions about project details that should have been straightforward. Frank Morrison making comments about ensuring continuity during the transition, even though I'd made it clear that Michael's departure didn't mean I was stepping down. Most disturbing was discovering that several of our key subcontractors had been contacted by someone claiming to represent the future leadership of Brooks and Associates. Someone was still working against me, even after Michael's resignation. Thursday afternoon, I was leaving the office late when I spotted Michael's BMW in the parking lot of a small diner about 2 miles from our building. My first instinct was to drive past and ignore it. I'd meant what I said about being done with him permanently. But something made me pull into the lot. What was Michael doing at this particular diner? It wasn't anywhere near his house, and it certainly wasn't the kind of place he'd normally choose for a meal. Jessica had expensive tastes, and this was definitely not her style either. As I sat in my truck debating whether to leave, I found myself thinking about that day 3 weeks ago when I'd hidden in his car. The day that changed everything. Maybe it was nostalgia, maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was just stubbornness, but I decided to find out what my former son was up to. Michael's car was parked in the back corner of the lot, away from the diner's windows. I waited about 10 minutes, watching the entrance, but Michael never went inside. He was just sitting in his car, apparently waiting for someone. When I saw him check his phone and then recline his seat slightly, I made an impulsive decision that would prove to be just as revealing as the first time. I was going to hide in his car again. I know how it sounds, a 56-year-old man playing hide-and-seek with his estranged son. But something was definitely going on, and my business instincts told me I needed to know what it was. I waited until a large delivery truck temporarily blocked the view between my position and Michael's car, then quickly moved across the parking lot. His doors were unlocked again. Apparently some habits never change. I slipped into the back seat and crouched down behind the driver's seat, just like before. From my hiding spot, I could see Michael in the rearview mirror. He looked different than he had at the birthday dinner. More relaxed, more confident. Almost like the old Michael, before I'd discovered his conspiracy and forced his resignation. At exactly 6 o'clock, I heard a car door slam nearby. Michael straightened up and rolled down his window. "Right on time," he said to someone outside the car. That's when I heard a voice that made my blood freeze. "Sorry I'm late." I had to make sure Leonard left the office first. Tommy Rodriguez. My oldest employee, my most trusted worker, the man I'd considered almost like family for 23 years, was getting into the passenger seat of Michael's car. "Tommy," Michael said warmly, "I can't tell you how much I appreciate your help with all of this." "No problem." "Mr. Brooks, your father's been good to me over the years, but business is business, you know." "Mr. Brooks." Tommy was calling Michael Mr. Brooks now, as if Michael was already his boss instead of me. "So what's the latest from inside the office?" Michael asked. "Well, your dad's definitely struggling without you there. He's been working longer hours, seems more stressed than before. And he's been asking a lot of questions about the Morrison project timeline." "Questions about the timeline? What kind of questions?" "He's starting to realize that some of the delivery schedules we discussed might not be accurate. I think he's beginning to suspect that maybe the project isn't as far along as the reports have been showing." My heart sank as I began to understand what I was hearing. The Morrison project, our biggest contract, the one that was supposed to secure our company's future, had been compromised from the inside. "How far behind are we, actually?" Michael asked. "About 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, depending on weather. But don't worry, I've been managing the documentation to make it look like we're on schedule. Your father sees what I want him to see." Tommy Rodriguez, the man I'd trusted with every aspect of our operations, had been falsifying project reports. The man I'd defended to Michael as valuable despite his age had been systematically lying to me for months. "That's perfect," Michael said. "The further behind the project gets, the more obvious it becomes that Dad can't handle the pressure of running the company." "Exactly. And when the client finally realizes how far behind we really are, when they start demanding answers and maybe even threatening legal action, your father's going to look completely incompetent. How much longer can you keep the real status hidden?" "Maybe another month, 6 weeks at most. After that, there's going to be a crisis that he can't ignore or explain away." Michael was quiet for a moment, then laughed, a sound I'd never heard from him before. "Cold and calculating. Tommy, you've been more valuable to this plan than you know. Even after I had to resign, you've kept working to make sure Dad fails. Like I said, business is business. And you promised me that when you take over the company again, I'd be promoted to project manager." "Absolutely. You'll have Frank Morrison's support for the transition, Dr. Peterson's documentation of Dad's declining mental state, and now a major project failure that clearly demonstrates his incompetence. It's perfect. I felt like I was going to be sick." Not only had Michael's original conspiracy been more extensive than I'd realized, but it had continued even after his forced resignation. And Tommy Rodriguez, Tommy who I'd considered family, had been part of it from the beginning. What about the other employees? Tommy asked. Some of them are still pretty loyal to your father. The ones who matter will adapt when the transition happens. The ones who don't will be replaced. We can run the company much more efficiently without all the dead weight Dad's been carrying. Speaking of dead weight, what about Leonard himself? I mean, after the Morrison project fails and he has his breakdown, what's the long-term plan? Same as before. Medical evaluation, legal guardianship, assisted living facility. The only difference is now we have a spectacular business failure to point to as evidence of his incompetence. And you're sure Frank Morrison is still on board? Frank's been documenting Dad's erratic decisions for months. He's ready to testify that Leonard's judgment has been compromised for a long time, and that the Morrison project failure was just the inevitable result of his declining abilities. Frank Morrison. Even after everything that had happened, even after I'd thought I'd neutralized Michael's conspiracy, my own accountant was still working against me. What about your wife? How's Jessica handling the temporary setback? Jessica's fine. She understands that this is a longer-term strategy now, but the end result is the same. We just had to be more patient after Dad discovered part of our original plan. I'd thought I'd uncovered everything, but apparently I'd only scratched the surface. Tommy, I need you to understand how important your role is going to be in the next phase, Michael continued. When the Morrison project failure becomes public, I need you to be the concerned employee who approaches the board about Leonard's declining performance. You've worked with him longer than anyone, so your word will carry extra weight. Don't worry, Mr. Brooks. I know exactly what to say. Leonard's been making increasingly poor decisions, missing important details, getting confused about project specifications. I can make it sound like I've been covering for him out of loyalty, but I can't do it anymore. Perfect. And Tommy, when this is all over, when I'm running Brooks & Associates the way it should be run, you're going to be very well rewarded for your loyalty. I appreciate that, Mr. Brooks. Your father's been sentimental about business relationships. But you understand that the company needs to be profitable above everything else. Exactly. Dad never understood that business isn't about being nice to people. It's about maximizing profit and eliminating inefficiencies. Every principle I'd tried to teach Michael about running a business with integrity, every value I'd hoped to pass on to him, had been completely rejected. In his mind, I wasn't just incompetent, I was fundamentally wrong about how business should be conducted. So what's our timeline now? Tommy asked. The Morrison project crisis should hit in about a month. When it does, I'll make a dramatic return as the concerned son trying to help his failing father. I'll suggest bringing in outside management consultants, maybe even offer to come back temporarily to help stabilize things. And when Leonard refuses, he won't refuse, because by then he'll be desperate. And once I'm back inside the company, even temporarily, it'll be much easier to document his incompetence and build a case for permanent change in leadership. What if he tries to fight back again? He was pretty smart about uncovering the original plan. He got lucky once because he overheard a phone conversation. This time we're being much more careful. Besides, the stress of the Morrison project failure is going to affect his judgment. People under that kind of pressure make mistakes, and if he doesn't make mistakes, then we'll help him make them. The casual way Michael said that, "We'll help him make mistakes," sent a chill down my spine. They weren't just planning to document my failures. They were planning to cause them. I should get going, Tommy said. Leonard sometimes comes back to the office in the evenings, and I don't want him to wonder where I am. Of course. Tommy, I can't thank you enough for everything you're doing. When this is over, you're going to be part of a much more successful version of Brooks & Associates. Looking forward to it, Mr. Brooks. I heard Tommy get out of the car and drive away. Michael sat there for a few more minutes, making notes on his phone, then started the engine. As he drove back toward town, I remained hidden in the back seat, trying to process what I'd just learned. The conspiracy I thought I'd defeated was still active, still growing, still working toward my destruction. Worse, it involved people I'd never suspected. People who'd been in my inner circle for years. Tommy Rodriguez, who I'd trusted with our most important projects, had been falsifying reports and planning to betray me in the most public way possible. Frank Morrison, who I'd confronted but thought was neutralized, was still actively building a case against my competence. And Michael was orchestrating all of it from the outside, planning his triumphant return as my savior turned successor. When Michael finally parked at his house, I waited until he went inside before emerging from the back seat. My legs were cramped again, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional devastation of what I'd discovered. I sat in my truck for a long time, trying to figure out what to do next. The first time I'd uncovered Michael's conspiracy, I'd had the advantage of surprise and the ability to threaten immediate exposure. This time the situation was more complex. They weren't just planning to have me declared incompetent, they were planning to destroy my business first, to create a crisis so severe that even my supporters would agree I needed to be replaced. The Morrison project was the key to everything. If it failed spectacularly, if it became public that I'd been mismanaging our biggest contract, then Michael's return would look like a rescue rather than a takeover. Tommy's testimony about covering for my mistakes would seem credible. Frank's documentation of my poor judgment would appear prescient rather than malicious. But now I knew something they didn't know I knew. I knew about the falsified reports, about the deliberate delays, about the planned crisis that was supposed to destroy my credibility. The question was, what was I going to do with that knowledge? Driving home that night, I realized that this wasn't over. My forced resignation of Michael, my careful exposure of his original conspiracy, my legal protections against conservatorship proceedings, none of it had actually stopped anything. It had just forced them to be more creative, more patient, more thorough in their planning. They wanted to destroy me? Fine. But this time, I wasn't going to be reactive. This time, I was going to be proactive. If Tommy Rodriguez wanted to falsify project reports, I was going to let him. If Michael wanted to plan a dramatic rescue, I was going to help him set the stage. If they wanted to create a crisis that would destroy my credibility, I was going to make sure that crisis destroyed them instead, because I had something they didn't have. I knew exactly what they were planning, and they had no idea that I knew. This time, I was going to beat them at their own game. But first, I needed to understand just how deep this conspiracy really went. Tommy Rodriguez and Frank Morrison were involved, but who else? How many of my employees, my advisors, my trusted colleagues had been turned against me? The next morning, I arrived at the office early and went straight to Tommy's workspace. As our senior project supervisor, he had access to all our major project files, including the Morrison project documentation. If he'd been falsifying reports, there would be evidence. It took me 2 hours of careful searching, but I found what I was looking for. Hidden in Tommy's desk, in a folder marked Personal, were 2 sets of Morrison project reports. One set showed the project running smoothly on schedule, within budget. These were the reports I'd been seeing. The other set showed the real status, 6 weeks behind schedule, cost overruns mounting, several critical milestones missed entirely. Tommy had been maintaining dual documentation systems, showing me false progress reports while keeping track of the real problems. And based on the dates on these documents, he'd been doing it for at least 4 months. 4 months. That meant Tommy's betrayal had started long before I'd discovered Michael's original conspiracy. While I was working late nights trying to ensure the Morrison project's success, Tommy had been secretly sabotaging it and documenting my supposed failures. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully returned the files to exactly where I'd found them. Tommy would never know I'd discovered his deception. Over the next week, I conducted my own investigation into the real status of the Morrison project. I contacted subcontractors directly, visited the construction site unannounced, and reviewed invoices and delivery schedules that Tommy had been managing. What I found was worse than even the hidden report suggested. The project wasn't just behind schedule, it was in serious trouble. Several critical permits had been delayed because applications had been filed incorrectly. Material deliveries had been scheduled for wrong dates, causing expensive delays and storage costs. Subcontractors had been given conflicting instructions, leading to rework and cost overruns. Tommy hadn't just been passively allowing problems to develop, he'd been actively creating them. Every mistake, every delay, every cost overrun had been carefully orchestrated to make the project fail, while making it look like the failure was due to my poor leadership. It was brilliant in a sick way. Tommy's decades of experience and intimate knowledge of our operations allowed him to sabotage things in ways that would be difficult to trace back to deliberate action. To anyone investigating later, it would just look like an aging company owner who'd taken on a project too big for him to handle. But now I understood their entire strategy, and I knew exactly how to turn it against them. I spent the weekend developing my own plan. If Michael wanted to return as my savior when the Morrison project failed, then I was going to make sure his return was spectacular, just not in the way he expected. Monday morning, I called a meeting with our entire staff. Everyone gathered in the main conference room, including Tommy Rodriguez, who sat in his usual spot near the front, looking completely relaxed and confident. I want to talk to everyone about the Morrison project, I began, watching Tommy's face carefully. It's our biggest contract, and I know there's been some concern about whether we're meeting all our deadlines. Several people nodded. The stress and pressure around the project had been noticeable to everyone. I've been doing some detailed reviewing of our progress, and I want to be transparent with all of you about what I've found. Tommy's expression didn't change, but I saw his shoulders tense slightly. It appears that there have been some discrepancies between the reports I've been receiving and the actual status of various project elements. Now Tommy looked concerned. I'll be conducting a comprehensive audit of all Morrison project, documentation and procedures over the next 2 weeks. I'll be reviewing every permit application, every delivery schedule, every subcontractor agreement, and every progress report. Mr. Brooks, Tommy said, speaking up for the first time, is there some specific problem you're concerned about? I'm concerned about accuracy, Tommy. I'm concerned about making sure that what we're reporting to our client matches what's actually happening on the ground. Of course, Tommy replied. We all want the project to succeed. I'm sure we do. And I'm sure this audit will help ensure that everyone's efforts are properly coordinated, moving forward. After the meeting, I watched Tommy return to his desk. Within minutes, he was on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. I was willing to bet he was calling Michael to report that their timeline had just been accelerated. That afternoon, my secretary informed me that Michael had called, asking to schedule a meeting to discuss some concerns about the company. Perfect. Let the games begin. Michael arrived at my office the next morning, looking concerned but confident. He was dressed impeccably, carrying himself with the authority of someone who believed he was about to regain control of his inheritance. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have actually been touched by his apparent concern for the company. Dad, I heard about the audit you announced yesterday. I'm worried about you. Are you? That's interesting, considering you resigned from the company 3 weeks ago. Just because I'm not working here anymore doesn't mean I stopped caring about Brooks and Associates. This company is still my family's legacy. Family's legacy. Not my legacy, family's legacy. As if he still had some claim to it. Michael, what exactly did you hear about the audit? Word gets around. People are concerned that you're creating unnecessary stress by questioning everyone's work. Some of the employees are wondering if you don't trust them anymore. Some of the employees. Like Tommy Rodriguez, no doubt. I'm just trying to ensure accuracy in our reporting. Surely you'd support that. Of course I would. But Dad, maybe this is a sign that you're taking on too much responsibility. The Morrison project is enormous. Maybe you need help managing it. Here it was. The beginning of his planned return as my savior. What kind of help did you have in mind? Well, I know that project inside and out. I helped develop the initial proposal. I built relationships with the key subcontractors. Maybe I could come back temporarily, just as a consultant, to help get things back on track. Back on track? Is the project off track? Michael paused, realizing he'd revealed more than he intended. I just meant that with a project this size, it's always good to have extra oversight. Michael, sit down. I want to show you something. I pulled out a folder containing copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. The dual documentation systems, the falsified reports, the deliberately incorrect permit applications, the sabotage delivery schedules. These are the real Morrison project reports, I said, spreading them across my desk. Not the ones Tommy's been showing me, but the ones documenting what's actually been happening. Michael's face went pale as he recognized what he was looking at. Dad, where did you get these? From Tommy's desk, along with documentation showing that our project has been systematically sabotaged for months. Permits filed incorrectly, deliveries scheduled for wrong dates, subcontractors given conflicting instructions. I don't understand. Sure you do. You understand perfectly. Because you planned all of it. I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made 2 nights ago in his car. Michael's own voice filled the room. The Morrison project crisis should hit in about a month. When it does, I'll make a dramatic return as the concerned son trying to help his failing father. The color drained completely from Michael's face as he listened to his own words. His own conspiracy, his own plan to destroy me being played back in my office. You see, Michael, I made the same mistake twice. I trusted you enough to get close to you when I shouldn't have. But this time, instead of just defending myself, I decided to get proactive. Dad, let me explain. Explain what? How you convinced my most trusted employee to betray me. How you planned to sabotage our biggest project to make me look incompetent. How you were going to swoop in as my savior while actually being my destroyer. Michael sat in stunned silence, just like he had 3 weeks earlier when I'd first confronted him. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. Tommy Rodriguez will be fired immediately for falsifying company documents and sabotaging our projects. Frank Morrison will be terminated as our accountant for participating in your conspiracy. And you will never, ever have any involvement with Brooks and Associates again. Dad, the Morrison project is really in trouble. Even if you fire Tommy, even if you fix all the problems he created, you might not be able to save it. You're right. The project might fail. Tommy and your other conspirators did too much damage for me to completely repair. But here's the difference between you and me, Michael. I'd rather fail honestly than succeed through betrayal. What about the employees? What about their jobs if the company can't survive the Morrison project failure? What about them? You were planning to fire half of them anyway once you took over. At least this way, they'll know they're working for someone who values loyalty and integrity. Michael stood up slowly. So that's it? You'd rather destroy everything than forgive your own son. I'm not destroying anything. You destroyed it all the moment you decided that stealing was easier than earning, that betrayal was more profitable than patience. I'm still your son. No, Michael. My son died the day I heard you planning my destruction with such casual cruelty. What you are now is just someone who shares my DNA and used to live in my house. Dad, please, get out of my office. Get out of my building. And Michael, if you ever try to interfere with my business or my life again, I won't just expose you privately. I'll make sure every business owner in Denver knows exactly what kind of person you are. After Michael left, I called Tommy Rodriguez into my office. Tommy, close the door and sit down. He entered looking nervous, but trying to maintain his usual friendly demeanor. Mr. Brooks, I heard Michael was here. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Tommy. In fact, everything's finally clear. I placed the copies of his hidden documentation on the desk between us. Tommy's face went through a range of emotions. Surprise, fear, resignation, and finally defiance. I can explain those. I'm sure you can. Just like you've been explaining away 4 months of deliberate sabotage and false reporting. Mr. Brooks, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. The pressure? Tommy, I trusted you with everything. I defended you when Michael wanted to fire you. I considered you family, and I appreciated that, I really did. But Michael made me an offer I couldn't refuse. What offer could possibly justify betraying someone who's employed you for 23 years? Security, Tommy said simply. A guarantee that I'd have a job and a promotion when Michael took over. You're getting older, Mr. Brooks. Eventually you're going to retire or something's going to happen to you. I needed to make sure I'd be okay when that happened. So you decided to make sure something happened to me sooner rather than later. It wasn't personal. It was just business. It was just business? Tommy, you've been to my house for Christmas dinner. You've met my grandchildren. You were at my wedding to Sarah. How is destroying me just business? Tommy looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Michael promised me things would be better for everyone once he was running the company. Better for everyone except me. He said you'd be taken care of, that you'd be comfortable in an assisted living facility after being declared mentally incompetent. I didn't know about that part, Tommy said quickly. Michael just said there would be a transition of leadership. You're lying. Tommy, you knew exactly what the plan was, because you've been executing it for months. Tommy sat quietly for a moment, then looked up at me with something like his old directness. You want the truth, Mr. Brooks? Fine. Yes, I knew. And yes, I went along with it because I thought it was inevitable anyway. You've been working yourself to death for years. You've been under incredible stress. And frankly, some of us wondered how much longer you could keep up the pace. So you decided to help things along. I decided to protect my own interests instead of going down with a sinking ship. A sinking ship. Tommy, this company is more successful than it's ever been, for now. But you're 56 years old. You have no clear succession plan since Michael left, and the Morrison project was always a huge risk. I figured it was better to be on Michael's side when things changed than to be left behind. I stared at this man I'd trusted for over 2 decades, this person I'd considered almost like a brother, and realized I'd never really known him at all. Tommy, you're fired. Security will escort you out, and if you ever set foot on our property again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Mr. Brooks, please get out. After Tommy left, I sat alone in my office for a long time, thinking about trust, betrayal, and the cost of building something meaningful. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked 18-hour days, trying to salvage the Morrison project. I hired new project managers, renegotiated contracts with subcontractors, expedited permit applications, and personally oversaw every aspect of the work. Some problems couldn't be fixed. Tommy's sabotage had caused delays that would cost us significant penalty payments. Several subcontractors had lost confidence in our management and withdrawn from the project. The client was threatening legal action over missed deadlines, but other problems could be addressed. With honest reporting and competent management, we were able to get construction back on track. We brought in additional workers to make up for lost time, We absorbed cost overruns rather than trying to hide them. 3 weeks after firing Tommy and severing ties with Michael permanently, I called a meeting with our client to discuss the project's status. "Mr. Morrison," I said, sitting across from him in our conference room, "I need to be completely honest with you about what's been happening with your project." I laid out everything: the falsified reports, the deliberate sabotage, the conspiracy to make the project fail. I showed him the real timeline, the actual costs, and the steps we were taking to get things back on track. "Mr. Brooks," he said after reviewing all the documentation, "this is quite a story. You're telling me that your own son and your most senior employee were deliberately sabotaging this project." "That's exactly what I'm telling you. And I take full responsibility for not discovering it sooner. What are you proposing we do about it?" "I'm proposing that we complete your project, even if it costs me everything I own. Brooks & Associates will absorb all penalties, all cost overruns, all delays. You'll get exactly what you contracted for, when you contracted for it, regardless of what it costs us." Mr. Morrison studied me carefully. "Mr. Brooks, this kind of sabotage, it's not really your fault. We could renegotiate the contract terms." "No. A contract is a promise, and I keep my promises, even when the people I trusted most don't keep theirs." 6 months later, we completed the Morrison project. It cost me nearly everything: my savings, my retirement fund, a second mortgage on my house. But we delivered exactly what we'd promised, on time and to specification. The day we handed over the keys, Mr. Morrison pulled me aside. "Leonard, I want you to know something. In 30 years of business, I've never seen anyone take responsibility the way you did. Most people would have declared bankruptcy, blamed their employees, walked away from their obligations. I couldn't do that. My name is on this company. My reputation is built on keeping my word. Well, because of that integrity, because of the way you handled an impossible situation, I'm going to be recommending Brooks & Associates for 3 additional projects. Bigger projects than this one." I stared at him in amazement. "After everything that went wrong?" "Not because of everything that went wrong, but because of how you handled it when things went wrong. That's when you really see what someone's made of. Today, 2 years later, Brooks & Associates is more successful than ever. We've completed those 3 projects Mr. Morrison recommended, and the referrals from those have led to even more work. I've rebuilt my savings, paid off the mortgage, and established a clear succession plan that doesn't depend on family members. I promoted Maria Santos to Vice President of Operations. She's proven to be everything I hoped Michael would be: competent, honest, loyal, and genuinely interested in building something lasting rather than just profitable. I hired new employees to replace the ones who'd betrayed me, and I've been much more careful about who I trust with sensitive information. But I haven't become cynical or paranoid. Trust is still essential in business and in life. You just have to earn it more slowly and verify it more carefully. Michael and Jessica divorced 8 months after his final departure from Brooks & Associates. Without the anticipated inheritance and business income, their financial situation became untenable. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Michael tried to start his own construction company but couldn't get bonding or financing due to his reputation in the industry. Tommy Rodriguez found work with a smaller construction firm, but at a significant reduction in salary and responsibility. Frank Morrison's accounting practice lost several clients after word spread about his role in the conspiracy against me. Do I feel vindicated? Sometimes. Do I feel sad about how everything ended? Every day. The hardest part isn't the betrayal itself, but the realization that I never really knew the people I trusted most. Michael wasn't corrupted by greed. He was always someone who believed that taking was easier than earning. Tommy wasn't a loyal employee who made a mistake. He was always someone who would choose self-interest over integrity when the stakes were high enough. I didn't lose good people who went bad. I discovered that people I thought were good had been pretending all along. But here's what I've learned. Betrayal tells you more about the betrayer than it does about you. Michael's willingness to destroy me doesn't mean I was wrong to trust him initially. It means he was wrong to abuse that trust. Tommy's decision to sabotage our work doesn't mean I was foolish to value loyalty. It means he was foolish to throw away something valuable. Brooks and Associates continues to grow, built on a foundation of actual integrity rather than assumed loyalty. I'm training Maria Santos and 2 other key employees to eventually take over when I'm ready to retire. But this time, they'll have to prove themselves over years, not inherit authority because of family connections. And yes, I still think about Michael sometimes. I wonder if he ever regrets what he threw away. If he ever realizes that he could have had everything he wanted through patience and honest work. But I don't wonder enough to reach out, and I don't regret enough to forgive. Some betrayals are too deep, too calculated, too devastating to overcome. Sometimes the only way to preserve your integrity is to walk away from people who have none, even when those people are your own family. The surprise I planned for my son, that day when I hid in his car, was supposed to be a promotion and increased responsibility. Instead, it became the discovery that changed everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, and my business. But maybe that was the surprise I needed, even if it wasn't the one I wanted. Maybe discovering the truth, however painful, was better than continuing to live a lie. At 58 years old, I'm building something new, a company based on earned trust rather than assumed loyalty, professional relationships rather than family obligations, verified competence rather than inherited authority. It's not the legacy I plan to create, but it's a legacy I can be proud of. And sometimes that's the best any of us can do. If you've made it this far in my story, if you've felt the weight of betrayal and the difficulty of rebuilding trust, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear that it's possible to survive even the deepest betrayals and build something meaningful from the wreckage. Because in the end, our character isn't defined by what others do to us, but by how we respond when they do it. And sometimes, the most important thing we can do is simply refuse to let other people's failures become our own. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you understand that even in our darkest moments, even when the people we trust most betray us completely, it's still possible to rebuild, to move forward, and to create something worth preserving. The truth may destroy the life you thought you had, but it's the only